Hi guys, this is jjlockhART back again this week with a new video. This week I'm doing something on traditional medium, mostly watercolors, pencil ink on watercolor paper, and I'm drawing my little sister. I'm just doing like a portrait of her for my father. It was his birthday last week, so I decided to draw my little sister for him as a gift. And at the beginning of the clip you can see my reference photo I was working off of. It was very dark and it was very low quality, so it was very hard to see all the detail, but I tried to make do. I tried to do as much detail as I could, and I used the photo for as much reference as possible. And as always, all the supplies will be listed in the description box below. But right now I'm using a watercolor with a watercolor pen, and it's just one of those water fountain pens for watercolor. And I'm just laying down all of my solid colors first. I'm doing a light wash first in order to get the basic color down, and then from there I like to go darker and darker. So I first start off with the main color, solid colors, really light. And then for the bear, it's like a stuffed animal plushy bear behind her. It is a light colored bear, so the way that I'm applying the watercolor is very free, very liberal, and I'm applying a wet on wet process in order to give it that feathered or fuzzy look, which means that I'm adding water and then adding color while the water is still wet, and then layering colors on top of wet, and that's what makes it sort of fuzz out like that. And I'm also putting down the solid color for my sister's hair. Her hair is very dark and very curly, so I'm just laying down a base color. And then I'm using a Copic marker right now to add a little bit more depth, and I really enjoy mixing medium, and by adding the Copic colors, it sort of gives it more depth but also more precision. With a watercolor it's a little bit harder to be a little more precise, so with the Copic marker, especially with the brush tip, I can go in there with very fine detail, a little bit finer than I could with watercolor. And I enjoy doing the washes first in watercolor because I'm able to cover a large area of space with a light color quickly. Because if I did it with the Copics, it would obviously I would waste a lot of ink, but also it would take longer to get these solid colors or solid blocks of wash. And so that's why I use the watercolor first to lay down the solid color or a light wash, and then I go in afterwards with the Copic markers to add a little more definition, and that way I have a little more control. And I'm adding the darkest areas, so that way I can go back and figure out what's the middle ground, I guess. So I usually put my washes of colors first, and then I try and do the eyes usually, because usually I do around the eyes the darkest, and so that therefore I can figure out where my middle ground will be. And then it's just a process of layering colors in order to create depth and dimension and shadow. And I'm also using a mechanical pencil and some of my Prismacolors. I'm using both regular Prismacolors and the VERITHIN ones, which the lead is not as waxy. So I'm using both kinds of Prismacolors. And in the very beginning when I was sketching, I used a color erase Prismacolor. And as I'm adding shadows and depth, I'm also developing the form or the structure of the face. So it's very important to be careful and make sure that you're really looking at your reference photo, because it's very easy to accidentally, put a shadow where it doesn't belong and then the face looks different. Portraits are very difficult, especially when it's someone that you know, because of course you don't want the person to be offended in any way, I guess. Or in this case, she's my little sister, so she probably won't be offended, but my father might look at it and be like, wait, that doesn't look a thing like her. So it's very important to look very closely at the details. And again, no one's perfect. We're not machines, so there's not, it's not like we're a camera and we can take a photograph. But it is very nice to incorporate realistic features from your reference photo, but then also be a little bit more free and make them your own. Like, for example, for the hair, I wasn't looking at every single little strand, obviously. This is where I was able to take a little more liberty and do the kind of hair that I normally do with my drawings. Big, voluminous, wild. So that's, I guess, my favorite part about doing portraits, that it is a challenge in getting them to look like who you're intending it to look like, or your model, or whoever you're modeling it after. But it's also very fun to add your own, I guess, aesthetic, your own take on it, I would say. And so it's always a process too in figuring out the things that you like and want to incorporate, but still making the final product look like the person. And then I'm adding some texture to her little hat or beanie. And in the picture, it did look kind of quilted, and so that's why I added some texture to it. And then the little flower was knit also, and therefore I went back and tried to add a little bit of line or a little bit of variation in color in order to give the illusion of texture. And I'm just adding a little bit of a cool shadow in certain areas. And then this is, as always, my favorite part, adding the highlights. I just feel that the image just comes to life once you add the highlights. And I especially love adding the highlights to the eyes. And I'm just using my UNIBALL SIGNO white brush. A white pen, sorry. And I'm adding a little bit of white charcoal to the cheek area just to make them pop a little bit more. And then for the bear, I'm just giving him a little bit more definition, a little bit more shadow, but I do want to keep him overall pretty light. And I added darker eyes with a quick rim of brown in order to create some dimension. Same thing with the nose. I added a lighter gray to the center, and then darker to the sides in order to give it a little bit more shape. And then I put the charcoal around the eyes so that it looked fluffy, and then I added the highlight with that with the SIGNO pen. And then I went back with my pencil and sort of made quick put hashes around the shape of the bear in order for it to look a little bit more feathered or a little bit softer. And just since I made that area so light, I just went in and wanted to darken her neck a little bit to add a little bit more shadow there. I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to her arms in order for it to be a little bit more cohesive with the bear behind her. And I added a little bit of darkness or a little shadow on the back of her beanie or her hat in order to give it a little more dimension, and also so that she looks like she's resting on the bear. And a little bit of highlight to her dark hair, and a quick signature. And then those are all the, you can see there, some of the many tools that I used to create it. And close up so you can see. And I really like how that bear in the back turned out. I'm not, I guess, too usual with drawing stuffed animals, but I do like how it turned out. And I really hope that my father loves the drawing. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.